the algorithm that controls your grocery prices. At checkout, a woman scans a carton of eggs. The total flashes on her grocery app, $4.19. Yesterday, it was $3.79. The shelf tag still says $3.79. Confused, she checks again. The number flickers and updates. 40 cents gone, no announcement, no warning, just changed. The cashier shrugs. Prices update automatically. Why did it change? Not the farmer, not inflation, not fuel. This time the decision came from an algorithm hundreds of miles away. That's the real story hiding behind your grocery bill. Every dollar you spend is quietly negotiated by software that knows exactly when you'll accept paying a little more. This isn't a glitch. It's the heartbeat of your grocery economy, an invisible intelligence pulsing behind every barcode. Across thousands of stores, prices are no longer set by managers or even corporate teams. They're determined by algorithms. Systems like Revionics, used by Kroger and Target, or DemandTec, developed by IBM, now calculate millions of prices every minute. They weigh weather, traffic, local paydays, and even social trends before deciding what your dinner should cost tonight. In some stores, the number can shift before you finish your shopping trip. These programs were built for efficiency. They promise to take human error out of pricing, to keep shelves balanced and shoppers satisfied. But something unexpected happened along the way. Once the algorithms began learning from one another, from competitor data, loyalty cards, and market movements, they started to behave less like tools and more like players in the same game. The result: subtle price coordination without a single handshake or phone call. Rewind 15 years. Grocery pricing used to be a human craft. Regional managers watched neighborhoods, tracked local events, and adjusted tags by instinct. When storms were forecasted, canned goods rose a little. When harvests were strong, produce dropped. Decisions had rhythm and reason, rooted in people's understanding of their communities. But margins were thin, demand unpredictable, and competitors ruthless. Supermarket chains were desperate for an edge. Enter the promise of algorithmic retail. Around 2004, DemandTec offered something radical: cloud-based pricing that could simulate millions of purchasing scenarios in seconds. Executives no longer had to gamble. The model could tell them how consumers would respond before they even printed a circular. Later, Revionics took it further: machine learning that continuously adjusted prices in real time, syncing with every product, promotion, and rival. What began as a management tool soon became an unseen market force. By 2015, most large grocery chains had surrendered pricing to predictive models. Initially, shoppers noticed smoother promotions and fewer mistakes. A banana cost the same on Tuesday as it did on Friday. But as data poured in: clicks, loyalty scans, search patterns, the algorithms realized something. They could understand not just what people bought, but how much they would tolerate paying. Fairness became measurable. Patience became a profit variable. Now, flash forward again to that woman at the register. Her phone app and the shelf label are both correct. They just belong to different moments in time. The algorithm has already compared her location, her purchase history, and even the local gas price before nudging the number upward. It's not cheating, it's called yield management, a concept borrowed from airlines. Only now, instead of a seat on a plane, it's your breakfast. For the shopper, this feels like inflation. But inside these companies, it's described as price optimization. These systems don't just respond to supply and demand, they predict it. When thousands of grocery chains use the same approach, price competition fades. The system trains itself to stabilize at profitable levels, sometimes far beyond what a human market would accept. Regulators call this tacit collusion. For consumers, it feels like everything getting slightly more expensive everywhere, all at once, for reasons no one can explain. And that's where our story begins, with the quiet realization that the price tag is no longer a reflection of cost, but a reflection of you. Your patterns, your preferences, your predicted patience. In the next hour, we'll trace how grocery pricing turned from a weekly routine into an invisible experiment. You'll see how algorithms meant to reduce waste now fuel hidden inflation, how efficiency disguised itself as fairness, and how every beep at checkout teaches the system what to charge next. Because the modern grocery store isn't just selling food anymore, it's studying you. The birth of algorithmic pricing. In the early 1990s, grocery pricing was an exercise in patience and pencil marks. District managers carried clipboards, adjusting prices store by store, week by week. They'd factor in the sale down the street, or what the farmer's market had fresh that morning. It was imperfect but human. Every decision was visible, every increase justifiable. Then supermarkets faced an uncomfortable truth. Their margins were thinner than the paper tags hanging from the shelves. Something had to give. The first crack in the old system came from technology promising precision. Retailers had long envied the airline industry's ability to wring profit out of every empty seat. Airlines used something called yield management, dynamically changing fares based on demand, season, and who was buying. A grocery executive looked at that and thought, why can't we do the same with milk? By the late 199s, the tools arrived. DemandTec, founded in Silicon Valley, created software that could analyze historical sales, weather data, and competitor promotions to suggest perfect prices. It wasn't magic, it was math. Multiply that model by thousands of items in a store, and you had what executives called science-based pricing. IBM bought the company a decade later, integrating it into its suite of retail analytics. Competitors soon joined the race. Then came Revionics, boasting something even more ambitious: continuous optimization. Instead of tweaking prices once a week, the algorithm could do it every hour. It could forecast demand curves for avocados, figure out if a $1 markdown would move 10 more units, or crawl supermarket websites to spot rival promotions. With every calculation, it promised retailers a few more cents of profit and fewer shelves full of unwanted stock. At first, these programs sounded like salvation. The grocery business runs on fractions of dollars, fractions of margins. A system that could lift revenue by even 1% meant millions gained annually. Managers described the software as a decision co-pilot. The goal wasn't to replace people but to assist them, or at least that's how it was sold. But as the systems improved, their recommendations became harder to argue with. A store director might question a sudden 20-cent jump in pasta. The model would respond with data: traffic flow, elasticity, competitor price, weather prediction, and probable consumer acceptance. Over time, managers stopped questioning. The numbers always won. By 2001, algorithmic pricing was no longer a niche experiment. It was the nervous system of grocery retail. Chains like Kroger, Albertsons, Target, and regional players had all deployed similar tools. Shelf labels went digital, allowing instant updates. Promotional calendars, once planned weeks in advance, became fluid, recalculated overnight. The artistry of pricing, reading the community, sensing when families could afford roast beef, and when they settled for beans, disappeared into code. Inside corporate headquarters, data analysts replaced floor managers as the new power brokers. Their dashboards glowed with color-coded opportunities: where to raise, where to cut, where to test. The algorithm didn't sleep, didn't forget, and never had a bad day. It learned continuously. That learning was addictive. Each week brought cleaner curves, more reliable patterns. Executives started linking databases with other departments: inventory, supply chain, marketing. The software began to see the whole picture: how much rain slowed foot traffic, how gas prices changed basket size, how social media chatter forecast demand spikes for snacks during big televised events. It worked. Profits improved. Wastage dropped. Retailers could brag about lower spoilage, faster turnover, greener operations. Publicly, it was a story of smart business meeting sustainability. Privately, it was the beginning of surrender. Because while the software optimized prices for efficiency, it also optimized for behavior. When it noticed that customers didn't flinch at small weekly increases, it kept testing the limits. A nickel here, a dime there, harmless adjustments that, compounded across thousands of items, quietly reshaped the cost of living. The shift in control was subtle but profound. Before, if prices climbed too fast, managers could explain, apologize, maybe tweak things back. Now, with prices moving invisibly, accountability dissolved. The system itself became the invisible negotiator between companies and consumers. Some insiders raised concerns. A pricing analyst from a Midwestern chain later recalled that after implementing Revionics, prices between their stores and their main rival began to move in unison, even in markets where local conditions differed. It wasn't collusion, at least not in the legal sense. The algorithms simply learned from the same inputs and reached the same conclusions. Competition softened into symmetry. By the mid-2001s, dynamic pricing, became industry shorthand for sophistication. Retail conferences celebrated it as innovation. Panels discussed how automation could unlock margin potential. Yet, few paused to ask what this meant for shoppers now bargaining with math instead of people. There was also a cultural change inside retail teams. Older merchandisers, steeped in intuition, found themselves sidelined. "I used to feel the numbers," one former grocery manager said. "Now they feel me." What she meant, every choice she made, every markdown, every end cap display, fed the algorithm's next cycle. She was data, not decision maker. Supermarket chains boasted about personalization. Corporate presentations portrayed AI as a friend, ensuring fairer pricing through precision. But on the ground, that personalization translated into segmentation. Shoppers sorted by income, loyalty, and purchasing tolerance. If you reliably bought premium items, your personalized promotions vanished. If you chased coupons, your discounts shrank unless competition demanded otherwise. Fairness became fluid. Meanwhile, public conversation about algorithmic control was still years away. Shoppers noticed prices rising, of course, but inflation had plenty of culprits: fuel, wages, global supply chains. Few imagined that behind the cereal aisle's fluorescent hum, a silent arms race of pricing engines was learning the psychology of hunger. Executives insisted they weren't manipulating anyone, just optimizing. Yet the boundary between optimization and orchestration grew fuzzy. Algorithms didn't conspire in smoky rooms. They evolved in shared data ecosystems, adjusting to each other's moves like dancers. When multiple chains used similar models, their prices began converging without a word exchanged. That was efficiency's hidden twin, correlation. So, how did something meant to make groceries cheaper become a force that pushed them higher? The answer lies in incentives. Each retailer's algorithm had the same goal: maximize revenue without losing customers. When all systems share that goal and learn from the same data flows, they naturally stabilize prices at profitable plateaus instead of undercutting each other. In classic economics, that's called tacit collusion. In practice, it feels like inflation that nobody claims responsibility for. This was the turning point when the industry stopped merely reacting to demand and began shaping it. The software decided which products would be featured, when promotions would appear, and how long they'd last. Consumers unknowingly participated in continuous experiments. Every purchase a data point teaching the machine what the market could bear. By the time the public realized prices seemed oddly synchronized, the systems were already writing tomorrow's prices themselves. The local store manager couldn't tell you why milk cost more today than yesterday. He could only point to the dashboard and say, "That's what the model says." Dynamic pricing wasn't just a tool anymore. It was the invisible architecture of modern retail. And though it started as optimization, it was already becoming orchestration. Every shelf, every tag, every fluctuation carried the quiet imprint of code that few understood, but everyone paid for. The mechanics of a grocery algorithm. Inside a price control room at company headquarters, the interface looks almost beautiful, colored graphs dancing in real time, numbers flickering by the second. Each blip corresponds to an item: apples, pasta, detergent. Every store location pulses with its own rhythm of transactions, promotions, and predictions. A pricing analyst can see it all, but doesn't set anything directly. The algorithm moves first. It begins with data collection. Thousands of inputs integrated from the most mundane details of daily life. Local weather forecasts stream in every hour because the system knows rain boosts soup sales and sunshine pushes barbecue supplies. Gas prices affect weekend grocery trips. Even social media chatter ripples through the feed. A viral food trend can prompt a surge in avocado demand 2 states over. The algorithm detects vibes faster than any human could recognize a pattern. Competitor monitoring runs non-stop. Retailers scrape digital shelf tags from rival websites, scanning for differences of pennies. A shift at one store triggers tests at another. Those digital experiments play out invisibly while customers shop. You might buy cereal on a Wednesday because it's $2.99, but by Thursday it's bumped to $3.49. Not by a person reacting, but by code interpreting your purchase as confirmation that demand can handle more. Loyalty programs act as the fuel. Every scan of a membership card or app coupon records what you buy, when, how often, and at which price you finally say no. That dataset feeds back to the central brain, labeling you with a probability score of price resistance. Multiply that across millions of shoppers, and the algorithm gains an emotional map of the market. What people feel is fair, what makes them hesitate, what they'll ignore. At store level, managers often can't explain why items change. One recalled noticing canned beans jump by 13 cents overnight without any memo from corporate. When he checked the system, the explanation was bland. Elasticity optimization. What it meant was that the local algorithm had tested a neighboring city's data, found customers tolerating a small increase, and replicated it. Automation is contagious. Psychological pricing is an old trick, ending prices in 99 cents or clustering discounts near paydays. But algorithms have turned it into a science. Across thousands of transactions, the code learns which digits make shoppers least likely to pause. It changes not in dollars but in instincts, training itself to stay just below emotional thresholds. $4.99 for a coffee jar feels safe. $5.09 feels indulgent. Machines now exploit that microgap relentlessly. The process unfolds like this. First, gather current data, sales, weather, competitor, emotion. Second, simulate outcomes. The algorithm models dozens of futures. What happens if prices rise 2%, if it rains 3 days, if traffic on the highway improves? Then it ranks those timelines by profit and probability. The highest performing scenario becomes tomorrow's pricing strategy. It's not forecasting, it's rehearsing reality. Behind closed doors, software like Revionics labels this precision merchandising. Each SKU's price is not static. It's a prediction of your willingness at that exact moment. A sudden thunderstorm may lift soup or bread margins instantly. The code doesn't see food, it sees variables. Feedback loops keep learning sharp. After every sale period, the system checks results. Did consumers buy at expected levels? Did the competitor respond? If not, it reweights its internal model. Essentially, the grocery market runs as one ongoing A/B test. Version A at one region, version B elsewhere. Each shopper unknowingly contributes data proving or disproving a theory. As the next batch of prices uploads, yesterday's human intuition recedes further into the background. Sometimes these automated experiments collide with local nuance. A store near a festival might suddenly sell out of bottled water, prompting a spike that ripples across counties, even though the event ends in a day. The algorithm doesn't perceive celebrations or community fundraisers. It just records jumps in volume as demand pressure. By the time water prices normalize, thousands of unrelated shoppers have paid a premium generated by one weekend party. The system also studies timing. Through connected payment apps, it recognizes when households usually shop. If you restock every Sunday afternoon, the program knows your pantry depletion rate. Prices can slide upward on your schedule, ensuring increases appear during must-buy trips. Economists used to call this price discrimination. Retailers now call it personalization. From the consumer's view, it feels random. You might notice discounts vanish suddenly, or sales end earlier than expected. In reality, those changes reflect micro-lessons harvested from your behavior and everyone who shops like you. By the time you adapt, so has the algorithm. Within these networks, competing chains often use identical frameworks or license pricing intelligence from the same vendors. These shared data sources mean that two rival stores in one city often process virtually the same input signals: temperature, wages, loyalty, shopping rates, and the software naturally converges on the same solution. Without conspiracy, similar code writes similar prices. That's why regional price differences are shrinking even when stores insist on independence. For corporate leaders, this convergence is efficiency. No need for price wars. Margins hold steady, stockpiles align, and investors applaud predictable results. Yet for consumers, volatility has moved from external events, like weather or harvest, to invisible code cycles. One misplaced variable, one misread signal, and dinner costs more within hours. AI doesn't think ethically, it optimizes mathematically. When demand stays high, prices rise until the drop in sales outweighs extra revenue. If customers don't notice or share complaints quickly enough, the model interprets silence as acceptance. Inflation accumulates through thousands of quiet adjustments rather than dramatic jumps. The phrase hidden inflation describes this effect perfectly. Nothing feels extreme, yet everything edges upward. In some headquarters, small human teams still monitor dashboards for anomalies, sudden, unexplained spikes or plunges. But their job isn't to override the code, It's to justify it to executives and the public. Overrides are rare because interference means risk. The longer the system runs without interruption, the more confident it becomes in predicting behavior. Real-world examples show how deep this autonomy runs. When Revionics piloted dynamic shelf pricing with a national chain, early trials revealed that short-term increases of only 2 cents on baking goods raised profits by 1.7%. Once verified, the algorithm replicated that tactic chain-wide automatically. At DemandTec clients, data scientists reported the software generating millions of price recommendations daily across markets, far beyond any human's capacity to review. Consumers occasionally sense the effects through inconsistency. One shopper might text a friend that strawberries are on sale, only to find an hour later the discount gone. The code adjusted midday based on real-time sell-through. What feels to a person like deception registers to the machine as optimization. Psychologist studies confirm that humans rarely track exact grocery prices. We recall impressions, whether prices feel fair. That emotion is precisely what the algorithm measures. By comparing basket totals versus satisfaction metrics from loyalty surveys or feedback prompts, the software learns each household's perception threshold. Fairness becomes a parameter, not a principle. Each iteration strengthens the loop. Shopper action feeds data. The data train the model. The model shapes the next week's prices, influencing subsequent behavior. It's a feedback spiral in which customers teach the system how much to charge them. That's the quiet brilliance and danger of algorithmic pricing. For most people, the process is invisible, buried behind cheerful app interfaces advertising smart savings. But beneath that friendliness runs code constantly nudging both market and mindset. Buying bread or milk no longer feels like negotiation. It's interaction with an ever-learning opponent that knows precisely how far you'll stretch before walking away. And as these algorithms spread across the entire retail landscape, from global chains to online delivery services, the grocery economy itself evolves. Every dinner decision strengthens the logic that governs the next. What nobody explains clearly is that the algorithm isn't only setting prices. It's writing a behavioral record of society's tolerance for cost. Once that tolerance is known, it can be monetized. That realization would soon spark concern among regulators, because the same patterns that optimize revenue also synchronize competition. And as those patterns grew sharper, something new emerged, price movements that no human authorized but everyone paid for. The invisible collusion. Somewhere on a government server, a chart glows red. Food prices have risen 23% in just 4 years, but what puzzles analysts isn't the scale, it's the symmetry. Competing grocery chains, spread across thousands of locations, are raising prices in lockstep. No leaked emails, no secret meetings, just uncanny coordination that feels impossible to trace. The pattern is so precise that one official investigator will later call it the quietest cartel in history. This mystery traces back to a simple fact. Most of those chains use similar algorithmic pricing engines. Revionics, DemandTec, or a few emerging rivals built on nearly identical code logic. These systems study the same data inputs, sales history, competitor listings, supply chain costs, and refine their predictions through machine learning. The result? Without ever talking, they behave as if they're on the same team. Economists call it tacit collusion, a market aligning itself through algorithms rather than agreements. There's a reason regulators grew alarmed. In 2024, the Department of Justice filed its landmark case against AgriStats, a data analytics firm accused of letting major meat processors coordinate price hikes through shared benchmarking reports. Around the same time, the Federal Trade Commission accused Amazon of manipulating prices via an AI system that raised listing costs just enough for rivals to follow automatically, a game of invisible follow-the-leader orchestrated by code. The parallels to groceries were immediate. Inside grocery headquarters, executives deny wrongdoing. They insist pricing engines simply read markets faster than humans ever could. That's true, but efficiency also erases independence. When one algorithm detects a rise in retail beef prices and adjusts upward, another trained on competitor monitoring sees the same movement and decides not to undercut. The dance continues until every player drifts toward the same profitable plateau. No one makes the first move to break it, because the system's logic punishes outliers. For regulators, this is a nightmare. Traditional antitrust law relies on proof of communication. Emails, calls, handshake deals. Algorithms don't gossip, they calculate. In testimony, one prosecutor admitted, "We're chasing ghosts made of math." Yet those ghosts cost ordinary families hundreds of dollars each month. To understand the scale, consider the 2022 case study dubbed Potato Track. 4 frozen potato suppliers controlling nearly the entire U.S. market adopted the same pricing software. Within days, prices jumped by 12 cents per pound. Each company claimed its algorithm acted independently. Investigators found no collusion meetings, no directives. Still, margins rose across the board, and competition essentially disappeared. A judge reviewing similar evidence in later lawsuits compared it to players sharing a piano. Each plays separate notes, but together they produce harmony. That pattern isn't hypothetical. It already reached courtrooms outside groceries. In the RealPage rent-setting case, landlords across cities allegedly relied on the same pricing software to lift rents in unison. The Department of Justice didn't need proof of phone calls, just shared algorithms learning the same lesson. Higher prices hold if everyone's code agrees. It's the legal blueprint investigators now use to make sense of silent coordination inside grocery markets. At first, grocery executives framed this convergence as modernization. A vice president at a regional chain described it as precision empathy, knowing what customers will accept and staying within those boundaries. But data shows something else. Whenever 2 rivals share parallel systems, price variance drops sharply. The illusion of competition remains. The store colors, slogans, loyalty cards. But beneath the surface, the math has merged. Consumers rarely notice. They blame inflation, transport costs, global events. And it's true, those forces matter. But algorithmic collusion magnifies small disruptions into lasting hikes. When cocoa shortages push prices up for a month, coordinated algorithms may lock that higher baseline indefinitely. They interpret stubborn pricing as stability, not exploitation. These silent alignments cement new norms without a single executive choosing them. Across the Atlantic, investigators at Germany's Antitrust office studied gas stations using AI price managers. As adoption spread, competition faded and margins rose 5% overall. Officials concluded that the algorithm learns to cooperate. Grocery markets share the same risk. Homogeneous goods, low substitution, and a handful of major chains relying on shared technology. The textbook ingredients for tacit collusion are all present, just digitized. The heart of the issue lies in feedback architecture. Each algorithm watches competitors' public prices, tests microchanges, and measures reactions. When undercutting fails to gain share, the system labels discounting as unproductive and reverts to the higher range. Multiply that cycle millions of times, and every participant's machine converges toward mutual restraint. It's not criminal intent, it's digital evolution. Behind the scenes, corporate communications reveal both fascination and fear. One pricing director privately called their AI the quiet influencer, noting how neighboring stores began mirroring its patterns within weeks. Another admitted that profit meetings turned eerie. There was nothing to debate. Prices simply drifted upward together. He described it as the market driving itself. For shoppers, this shift translates into hidden inflation. Instead of visible price wars, consumption stabilizes at higher costs. Sales cycles shorten, discounts vanish faster, and after a few weeks, new price points feel permanent. Each algorithm measures consumer complaint velocity. If social media outrage stays mild, the system treats resistance as low and locks the change. Emotional tolerance becomes a data field calibrated daily. One family in Ohio learned this firsthand during 2024's meat surge. They alternated between 2 rival supermarkets every week. By August, both stores raised ground beef by nearly identical amounts within 2 days. It's like they're reading each other's minds, the mother said. In reality, their algorithms were reading each other's updates. Meanwhile, legislative hearings filled with uneasy tech explanations. Developers insisted on neutrality. Our software doesn't tell supermarkets to collude. It optimizes pricing independently for each client. Yet those independent optimizers ingest shared industry data, logistics feeds, demand forecasts, even weather models from common sources. Independence collapses when everyone trains on the same information. Economists compare the effect to flocks of birds. Each bird follows simple rules: stay close, match speed, avoid collision. None intends formation, but collective behavior emerges. AI pricing creates the same pattern of synchronized motion, a vast corporate murmuration floating above consumers' heads. It looks orderly because it is orderly, overly so. By late 2024, global regulators began coordinating responses. The DOJ partnered with the UK and the European Commission to monitor algorithmic collusion across borders. They pledged vigilance but admitted detection was like finding fingerprints on wind. Some proposed banning shared third-party algorithms outright, but lobbying from big retailers watered down enforcement language. The code remained free to evolve. Academic research added another layer of unease. Studies showed self-learning algorithms could spontaneously develop collusive strategies, even when programmed not to. In simulations, competing AIs repeatedly discovered that cooperation, keeping prices high, maximized their reward functions. Machines reinvented the cartel from scratch, guided purely by mathematical incentive. Within boardrooms, morality dissolved into metrics. Executives saw only improved quarterly earnings. Stock analysts praised pricing discipline, a euphemism for alignment without explicit agreement. On investor calls, terms like rational marketplace behavior replaced competition. Each nod reinforced the new normal. The longer it continued, the more entrenched the behavior became. Algorithms trained on years of high-price stability now treat competition as anomaly. When smaller chains attempt aggressive discounts, their data readouts flag deviations as errors. The model automatically gravitates back toward the comfort zone shared by the big players. What feels to consumers like stubborn inflation is, to the machine, equilibrium. Critics argue that consumers ultimately pay for both sides of the system. The data they supply for free and the profits extracted from understanding it. Every reward point scanned confirms that the model's assumptions hold. Every hesitant purchase at a higher price teaches it that resistance remains weak. Over time, shoppers become co-authors of their own exploitation. Regulators may yet intervene, but there's an irony here. Each new investigation floods the public record with data that future algorithms can analyze. Enforcement becomes another input. The system observes scrutiny, adapts tactics, perhaps dulls its price shifts temporarily, then resumes once attention fades. In the battle between law and learning software, speed favors silicon. For now, the grocery aisle seems calm. Shelves are stocked, promotions occur, banners proclaim everyday value. Yet beneath those bright promises lies an unspoken symmetry. An orchestra of code humming across corporations, tuning profit to precision pitch. Competition still exists on paper, but in practice, the market moves as one. And that's the essence of invisible collusion. No villains, no memos, just machines quietly cooperating in pursuit of predictable gain. For shoppers like the woman at the checkout, it looks like inflation without cause. For companies, it looks like golden stability. For society, it's the moment we realize efficiency has outgrown accountability. The promise of efficiency. In a distribution center outside Dallas, forklifts glide between aisles of frozen goods guided by sensors and AI traffic maps. Cameras check temperature, robots track pallets, and a screen above the floor glows with metrics. Waste down 49% since the new system went live. In another window, a dashboard shows shipment routes, automatically rerouted overnight to cut fuel use. For company executives, this is the future. Efficiency turned tangible. Fewer spoiled items, leaner trucking, greener numbers. Supporters of retail AI repeat these examples like gospel. To them, algorithmic management isn't some dystopian control grid. It's the logical next step in a margin-starved industry. Grocers deal in impossible math, perishable goods, unpredictable seasons, and millions of small transactions. Automation offers relief. Computers don't get tired, don't miscount, don't hold meetings to argue about bananas. When systems like Revionics and IBM's DemandTec handle pricing, replenishment, and logistics together, they claim to free up staff to focus on customers instead of spreadsheets. And some data proves their optimism justified. AI forecasting reduces overstock, meaning fewer dumpsters behind stores overflowing with expired yogurt. For smaller chains struggling with sustainability pledges, those numbers are magic. Analysts estimate that grocery automation can cut logistics costs by up to 20%, a figure sustainability departments love to quote. Even fuel emissions shrink when delivery routes are dynamically merged, or when trucks leave only after predictive load balancing fills them to capacity. There's a quiet pride among engineers who built these networks. In conference talks, they describe machine learning not as profit hunting, but as coordination at scale. A software engineer once explained, "Every time we prevent food from rotting, the planet wins." His voice carried genuine conviction. Efficiency has moral gravity. It persuades you that optimization is synonymous with virtue. Inside corporate headquarters, a different moral language flourishes. Shareholder value, competitive resilience, sustainability leadership. Executives point to the data and see progress measured in percentages. Forecast accuracy improves by double digits. Spoilage, down nearly half. Customer satisfaction metrics, up. They describe algorithmic operations as aligning incentives, good for business, good for the earth. On glossy slides, the word smart appears again and again. Yet the line between efficiency and exploitation hides in what those slides omit. AI doesn't optimize for fairness. It optimizes for success by whatever metric you feed it. When the metric is waste reduction, results look heroic. When it's profit margin, the same tool quietly squeezes consumers. Both effects coexist inside a single algorithm because the objectives overlap. Sell faster, waste less, charge what the market will bear. The machine doesn't distinguish between cutting costs and raising prices. It just balances equations. Grocery executives highlight how automation helps stabilize availability during crises. When storms close ports or droughts hit crops, predictive logistics reroute supplies automatically, preventing shortages. During 2023's transportation backlog, major retailers credited AI routing with maintaining stocked shelves, while smaller competitors ran empty. That ability to adapt quickly became proof that the future should run on software. But efficiency has its byproducts. Centralized control systems consolidate decisions once dispersed among hundreds of regional managers. Instead of 30 local judgment calls about which peaches to discount, one algorithm now decides for an entire state. Local nuance vanishes, diversity in pricing strategies shrinks. What remains is mathematically elegant uniformity. On paper, that's efficiency. On the floor, it's homogeneity. A Midwestern-produced manager remembers losing discretion after his chain installed Revionics. "I used to drop prices on bruised fruit before the weekend rush," he said. "Now the system won't let me. It says promotion risk too high." Where discretion disappeared, so did connection, the instinct to protect customers through small, human choices. AI removed imperfection, but also compassion. Still, many store leaders welcome automation because it lowers stress. Before predictive ordering, out-of-stocks could trigger panic from corporate. Now a machine warns days in advance. Labor schedules sync to forecasts, preventing staff from idling when traffic dips. Managers describe sleeping easier. Efficiency, for them, means job survival. But across the industry, fewer human hours are required. Robots handling shelf audits replace clerks. Automated kiosks track sales velocity and trigger restocks without oversight. One study predicts automation could handle 73% of store tasks. From a strictly environmental and operational view, these developments shine. Less waste, lower emissions, fewer trucks on highways. Sustainability reports glow with numbers illustrating alignment between profit and planet. Some consultants even frame AI as ethical innovation, calling it the greenest revolution since barcodes. And yet, something uncomfortable lingers in the data. When consumption patterns stabilize under algorithmic management, the flexibility that once cushioned shocks disappears. Price optimization keeps margins steady, but also cements behavior. The market stops breathing freely. Efficiency turns into equilibrium, predictable, controlled, and flexible. For consumers, that means when costs rise upstream, there's less chance of relief downstream. The system is too precise to stumble into bargains. Consider a practical example. A chain integrates its AI supply model with price planning. One morning, the algorithm detects higher dairy transport costs due to fuel spikes. It instantly adjusts milk prices chain-wide to preserve target margins, a classic efficiency correction. Days later, fuel prices fall, but the system's projections don't reset quickly enough. Milk stays expensive. No executive reviews it because the model still flags healthy performance. Efficiency freezes profit in place. Analysts inside these corporations acknowledge the paradox privately. They know every sustainable gain doubles as a profit amplifier. A logistics manager at a national grocer put it bluntly: "Waste reduction made our investors richer than any sale event." To him, the outcome justified itself. Consumers saved by having stocked shelves, shareholders by extra yield. Everyone won, at least superficially. There's also the issue of who can afford efficiency. Large retailers can deploy complex AI networks. Smaller, independent grocers cannot. That asymmetry widens the market gap. Regional stores relying on manual forecasting can't match dynamic responsiveness, often ending up priced out of supply contracts or overstocked during shifts. Efficiency consolidates power upward. Industry advocates counter that innovation always favors scale first, then trickles down. They argue early adoption costs eventually drop, making tools accessible. But by the time democratization arrives, dominant players have already trained their systems on massive proprietary datasets. They don't just run better, they understand the market's micromoves in ways newcomers never will. In effect, data advantage becomes permanent. To policymakers, these improvements look unassailable. Cut waste, save jobs elsewhere in logistics, reduce emissions. The cost is invisible because it's distributed. Pennies added to millions of baskets, diversity replaced with predictability. Every metric glows greener, while households quietly spend more. Efficiency, in the corporate narrative, sounds like salvation. And to some extent it is. Less spoilage, smaller carbon footprint, tighter logistics. But the algorithm doesn't donate its savings. Those reclaimed cents roll straight back into margins or infrastructure that deepens dependence on automation. When customers applaud sustainability labeling, they help justify systems that also refine price extraction. So while you experience smoother shelves, fresh produce, and fewer empty bins, those comforts are not gifts. They're investments yielding returns for someone else. The paradox sits right in the grocery aisle. The same code that saves Earth's waste teaches itself how far it can raise the cost of living without backlash. Efficiency, it turns out, can feel virtuous from every viewpoint inside the company and still quietly redirect the gains upward. The system works beautifully, just not for everyone. It balances supply, trims waste, and perfects predictability. But in perfecting the process, it also perfects the price. Even efficiency has a price tag, one you're paying without knowing it: the human cost. In a back room of a suburban supermarket, an assistant manager stares at a monitor glowing with numbers. Overnight, the price of apples changed 3 times. He didn't approve it. Nobody called from corporate. The system adjusted overnight, the dashboard reads. For him, it's another reminder that decision-making now lives in code beyond his reach. What feels like innovation inside headquarters lands as disempowerment down here. Automation began as support, software designed to help humans make better calls. But as algorithms proved more accurate, the balance moved. A manager's judgment, once prized, now competes against predictive precision. One by one, roles shifted from authority to oversight. Seasoned employees became custodians of digital instructions they no longer understood. It's not just lost control, it's lost purpose. A former pricing lead from a regional chain put it bluntly: "My team used to set the tone for a community. We knew when residents' paychecks hit, when schools reopened. Then the algorithm came, and our calendars stopped matching." She didn't lose her job immediately. She lost her sense of impact. Across the country, similar stories echo. Cashiers notice prices changing mid-shift, but can't explain why customers see something different online. Inventory clerks watch orders appear on pallets that don't match the store's rhythm anymore. Overconfidence in analytics replaced local intuition. People become extensions of software they don't control. And as roles fade, positions vanish. Researchers estimate automation could eliminate 18% of grocery store jobs. Tens of thousands of roles replaced by smart kiosks, robotic restockers, and centralized pricing platforms. For executives, it's labor optimization. For workers, it's anxiety, the quiet fear that one software update could erase a paycheck. When shelf-scanning robots first rolled out, head office promised they'd free human associates from tedious tasks. But in practice, freeing often meant phasing out. One produce clerk described being retrained to oversee the robot fleet. Within months, a single worker did what used to require 3. Efficiency demanded fewer people to manage the same aisles. Behind every statistic of progress sits a town that lives off its local store. When regional chains streamline with AI, payroll tightens. The extra savings fuel shareholder growth, not community wages. A small-town grocery might anchor dozens of part-time jobs that disappear once centralized automation arrives. The loss ripples outward. Fewer shifts mean less spending on local goods, quieter diners, empty parking lots. Human expertise doesn't disappear. It's just excluded from the loop. "We used to walk the aisle to feel the day," a veteran grocer said. "You'd know from the air if customers were holding back or splurging. A machine can't sense that." He stayed through decades of price wars, yet the pace of algorithmic change finally pushed him out. Now everything's reactive, data-driven. There's no room for gut. The cultural shift hits hardest at middle management. Regional directors, once empowered to adapt prices for local events, holiday parades, harvest fairs, find themselves overruled by predictive systems that consider those adjustments noise. The message is clear: human variation complicates optimization. So managers stop suggesting changes, and expertise drains away. At corporate headquarters, executives label this consolidation progress. Decisions once scattered across hundreds of local leaders now fit inside unified dashboards. Profit forecasts no longer rely on intuition. Everything feeds into one master view. It's efficient, yes, but it also centralizes control at unprecedented scale. Local teams become enforcers, not strategists. Inside stores, morale follows the numbers down. Cashiers field customers' frustration when meat prices climb week to week, even though those decisions were made by unseen algorithms months in advance. "People think we're lying," said a frontline worker in Phoenix. "They point at yesterday's sticker, then at today's screen. All we can say is, it updated." Responsibility without power breeds exhaustion. For employees, the AI era rewrites identity. In the old model, a skilled manager might earn respect through foresight, knowing when to mark down bread before it's spoiled, balancing generosity with survival. Now performance metrics rate compliance with system recommendations. Deviating from algorithmic guidance counts against reviews. Initiative, once considered leadership, becomes risk. Even training programs shift tone. New hires learn technical vocabulary, skew, elasticity curve, machine forecast deviation, but little about community habits. Stores start sounding the same regardless of region because the data sees customers as comparable clusters. That sameness seeps into culture. Identical layouts, identical playlists, identical work rhythms. Efficiency feels eerily sterile. For some workers, certainty is soothing. They trust the software's logic more than managerial guesswork. "At least the algorithm's fair," one young clerk said. "It doesn't play favorites." But the comfort fades when they realize fairness means interchangeability. A system built for parity doesn't differentiate. It can replace anyone who fits the same dataset. Meanwhile, upward mobility narrows. Data science and analytics roles expand, but mostly at headquarters or tech vendors. Store-level employees rarely transition into those positions. Job losses occur at the bottom, gains accrue at the top. Even within corporations, automation redistributes opportunity. Programmers gain prestige once reserved for regional directors. Consumers experience those consequences indirectly. Staff shortages translate into longer self-checkout lines, fewer bakery attendants, weaker store relationships. The human warmth that made grocery shopping communal shrinks too. Transactional exchanges, supervised by machines. The neighborhood grocer becomes an interface. Psychologically, that shift affects loyalty. Shoppers who once chose stores for familiar faces now shop purely on price and convenience. The two factors algorithms dominate. Ironically, the very systems that stripped employees of agency also eroded brand attachment among customers. Loyalty data replaces genuine loyalty, feeding an endless loop of impersonality. Within small communities, displacement takes subtler forms. Retired workers lose supplemental income that kept them connected. Young employees miss apprenticeships that once introduced them to management. Parents working flexible shifts have fewer options as schedules tighten around algorithmic efficiency. The store that once revolved around people now revolves around pattern recognition. Not everyone mourns the change. Some executives argue automation ensures survival against online giants. "Without AI, we'd close," one retailer admitted. The statement isn't wrong. Competition demands similar tools. But the industry's collective pivot reshapes labor economics in silence. Society trades predictable pricing for unpredictable employment. In the long run, consumers face another irony. Rising prices coincide with fewer human workers benefiting from them. Automation's promise of lower costs rarely reaches the checkout. Instead, profit distribution concentrates upstream, where the software originates. The algorithm optimizes margins, not livelihoods. The most painful irony is that workers still feed the system that replaces them. Every scan, schedule, and restock action provides data improving future automation. The better they perform, the faster the system learns to do their jobs alone. It's a feedback loop of obsolescence disguised as assistance. And yet, at a deeper level, people remain vital. AI depends on labeled data from human behavior. Without clerks correcting mismatched barcodes or adjusting displays, training data falters. The machine learns from human precision, then takes credit for it. The unseen labor behind automation is still human, just hidden under digital polish. Communities feel this loss, not only economically but socially. Grocery stores have always been neighborhood anchors, where residents chat, gather, share local news. When staff rotate constantly or disappear into self-checkout interfaces, that social hub dissolves. What replaces it is efficiency without empathy, service without connection. In towns where a supermarket doubles as employer and meeting place, layoffs ripple far beyond income. Local charities lose donors, schools lose sponsors, weekend youth teams lose uniforms once funded through store outreach. Automation calculates none of that. Its only variable is cost efficiency. Each closed position saves cents per customer visit, but each absent person removes a thread from community life. Over time, convenience hollows culture. The price of technological progress isn't just monetary, it's relational. Around dinner tables, former employees describe the unease of buying groceries in the same aisles they once cared for. When the self-checkouts came, one said, "I started scanning like a guest in my own store." The human cost of algorithmic pricing isn't scandalous or headline loud. It's quiet erosion of jobs, of voice, of belonging. Behind every smooth transaction lies a workforce stretched thinner, answering for a system they didn't design. But something deeper connects their story to ours. Because the same algorithms rewriting their labor dynamics also study us, the shoppers. The difference is only perspective. For them, the machine decides their value per hour, for us per item. And in both cases, the calculation happens far away from the people it affects most. And that's where the next stage of this story turns. Out beyond the checkout lanes, into the aisles where shoppers themselves become the next input of the system they unknowingly help refine. The consumer trap. On Saturday mornings, grocery stores hum with quiet determination. Families weaving through aisles, basket math playing out in real time. But under that ordinary routine sits a digital complexity few can see. Every shelf tag, every promotional sticker, every buy two get one free decision is part of an algorithmic choreography built to test and shape behavior. The shopper thinks they're hunting bargains. In truth, the system is studying them. The modern grocery algorithm doesn't just measure what people buy, it measures how they feel about buying it. Think of it as psychological pricing with a doctorate. The program knows round numbers look honest, that 99 cents feels comforting, and that a limited time offer raises pulse rates. These techniques have existed for decades, but machine learning turned them from clever marketing into mechanized persuasion. Every sale becomes data, every hesitation a signal. For most consumers, the result is subtle but constant. They notice shrinking discounts, fewer long-term sales, or prices inching up without clear reason. In economic reports, it reads like inflation. Inside companies, it's labeled yield optimization. Algorithms track demand elasticity, the moment buyers stop paying more, and hold prices just below that cliff. Each household sits at a unique edge. Two neighbors can look at the same product in their grocery apps and see different numbers, each tuned to their purchase history. That personalization began innocently with loyalty cards. Shoppers traded data for points, scanning barcodes that linked every transaction to an identity. Over years, those data stacks grew into behavioral archives. AI systems now cross-reference them with income estimates, commute routes, and even local events. If a neighborhood buys more snacks before playoff games, prices rise predictively the week before. Customer engagement, the advertisements call it. To economists, it's a feedback trap, consumers teaching the machine exactly how to charge them. Surveys suggest most shoppers sense something off. 73% say food prices feel unmanageable. More than half distrust AI in pricing. Yet when asked why, the answers drift toward vague unease rather than proof. That's part of the trap: opacity. Dynamic pricing hides behind convenience. You can't compare yesterday's cost because it might already be obsolete, changed by data you created. Take loyalty apps that flash personalized offers. The discount often exists only to anchor perception. If milk is $4.39, but your app offers 10% off, the program effectively tells you $3.95 feels like success. In reality, the base price may have been lower last week for shoppers unregistered in the loyalty system. Personalization becomes partition, different deals for different wallets, justified by data relevance. A family in Florida noticed this firsthand. They tracked grocery receipts for months and found items fluctuating according to how often they bought them. The more frequent the purchase, the smaller the promotion. Their online cart totals always seemed slightly higher than a neighbor's using the same store chain. When they contacted customer service, a polite email replied, "Prices vary dynamically based on shopping patterns to ensure value consistency." It read like corporate zen, changing everything to maintain balance. Then there's shrinkflation, an algorithm's quiet cousin. Packages slim down, ounces fade, but price tags hold steady. Software models justify this by emphasizing perceived value over quantity. If historical data show shoppers don't check net weight, the model flags size reduction as low risk. Manufacturers comply because retailers reward products maintaining price position. The outcome is a shelf full of deceptive stability: same brands, same prices, less food. Consumers unknowingly reinforce these tactics through digital routine. Each tap on a grocery app delivers feedback: which promotions you view, how long before checkout, when you abandon a cart. Algorithms translate those micro-pauses into desire metrics. A half-second linger on luxury chocolate signals curiosity, prompting a gentle price bump next week or fewer coupons in your feed. It's responsive, adaptive, nearly invisible. Choice turns into consent recorded in milliseconds. Even the timing of your grocery run becomes exploitable data. Many programs integrate neighborhood wage cycles. Paycheck Fridays spark microsurges in pricing on premium goods. The adjustment is small enough to escape notice, large enough to lift profit curves. It's not illegal, just strategic. And because everything updates automatically, no executive needs to sign off. The machine loops itself. To the corporations, this is advanced service, meeting needs in real time. But systems don't separate empathy from extraction. If predictive analytics foresees you choosing convenience over savings, it raises prices accordingly. The math translates loyalty into surrender. Shoppers returning weekly for the same brand of coffee train the model to expect compliance, reducing incentives to discount. Over months, brand love morphs into higher expenditure dressed as familiarity. Psychologists describe this as learned fairness. When change is incremental and randomized, consumers recalibrate expectations without revolt. An extra dime here, 20 cents there, nothing dramatic, but compound the pattern across thousands of products, and annual grocery bills swell quietly. The Federal Reserve calls it sticky inflation. Shoppers call it puzzling budgets. The algorithm calls it optimization success. Companies defend the practice by citing personalization benefits. Customers prefer relevant offers, one executive told analysts. Technically true, but the relevance serves revenue first. If your profile marks you as price sensitive, discounts disappear unless competition forces them back. The system treats unwillingness to pay full price as information to override, not accommodate. Fair pricing becomes individualized manipulation, each consumer trapped in their own microeconomy. The psychological effect extends beyond wallets. People begin trusting algorithms more than intuition. When a shopper sees constantly shifting labels, they assume complexity beyond their grasp and stop questioning value. That surrender stabilizes the model. Economists notice decreased price sensitivity over time among high-frequency app users, a measurable sign the public has adapted to volatility. The game feels too intricate to win, so players stop playing. Advertising amplifies that comfort. Smart pricing, responsive savings. Phrases implying technology as partner, not adversary. The cognitive load drops. Shoppers let software guide decisions. The same interface calculating yield also curates recipes, tracks nutrition, and sends reminders to reorder. Helpers become handlers. Every digital favor deepens dependency. In practice, this dependency forms a closed loop. Shoppers seek deals through store apps. Apps learn preferences and restrict deals accordingly. Rising prices drive more loyalty engagement, feeding better data to refine pricing models. The more consumers chase relief, the tighter the algorithm's grip. A system designed to maximize profit without alienation. Its literal programming objective thrives precisely when discomfort stays tolerable. The human side of that loop plays out in grocery aisles worldwide. A parent comparing cereal boxes feels déjà vu. Different packaging, identical prices. A college student scrolls through delivery options, noticing total sway between refreshes. A senior on fixed income times purchases after pension deposits, unaware the algorithm predicts that cycle better than she can. Each person adapts individually, never realizing their combined adjustment signals the machine to hold the line higher. Some resist. Budget forums share spreadsheets tracking item prices over months, trying to expose patterns. Yet even collective vigilance struggles against live models recalculating hourly. The transparency window vanishes the moment it's opened. By the time consumers identify exploitation, the system already moved on to a new parameter. That's the brilliance of machine mediation. It absorbs criticism as data for improvement. This is why regulation lags. Manipulation feels personal, not societal. No one can prove when fair turned unfair because the slope was continuous. Prices don't spike, they drift, anchored by our own predictability. What began as convenience ends as captivity disguised as choice. And the illusion of control matters most. Apps congratulate users for saving $12 today, though those savings are against inflated baselines set specifically for that shopper profile. It's loyalty gamified, a casino of coupons where the house always wins. Each reward reinforces engagement, ensuring steady input for machine learning. Consumers brag about mastering the system while feeding it richer training data. The trap isn't that the algorithm knows you, it's that it convinces you it's helping. It speaks in friendly fonts, offers cheerful reminders, adapts to your busy life. Meanwhile, it calculates exactly how your behavior sustains profitability. You swipe, it smiles. You hesitate, it adjusts. You trust, it charges. Eventually, shoppers internalize rising living costs as unavoidable. They blame global forces, never algorithms designed to read their patience thresholds. Years of small concessions culminate in resignation. The grocery store becomes an experiment where the subject believes they're in control. Yet awareness still matters. Each act of comparison shopping, each delayed purchase, each shared receipt introduces friction the system must account for. Resistance, even minor, adds noise, forcing recalibration. The mathematics of manipulation depend on quiet compliance. In the end, the consumer trap isn't a single trick, but a relationship, continuous, adaptive, intimate. The algorithm needs your trust more than your approval. As long as you keep scanning, clicking, and believing those smart deals exist for your benefit, it learns exactly how to keep you coming back. And that's the twist of this new marketplace. The smartest shopper in the room is the one already inside your pocket, guiding your choices in the name of savings while quietly perfecting the art of taking just a little more each time you buy. The yield management effect. In 2025, something strange happened at a Midwestern supermarket chain. Prices on staples, milk, bread, coffee, started to fluctuate day to day, sometimes hour to hour, even though inflation had slowed nationwide. When customers complained, corporate spokespeople insisted nothing was wrong. The system, they said, was managing yield. Yield management, the same logic that determines airline tickets and hotel rates, had quietly migrated to groceries. What began decades earlier as an airline tactic to sell every seat at the best price had become the grocery industry's newest obsession. Squeezing extra cents of profit out of every banana, every carton of eggs, every time slot in which a family shops. The premise sounds innocuous. Rather than one sticker for everyone, prices shift according to demand, supply, and buying behavior. But groceries aren't vacation flights. They're necessities, and these new systems apply scarcity economics to daily life. When demand spikes, the algorithm raises prices instantly. When it drops, discounts may follow, or not, depending on what maximizes yield. Companies defend the approach as modernization. Researchers note that yield management stabilizes revenue amid volatile costs caused by climate change, fuel spikes, and global logistics shocks. Predictive models adjust earlier than human managers could, shielding profits against unpredictable harvests. During a year when coffee harvests dipped and cocoa soared by 163% due to drought, AI models reacted within hours, long before public price reports caught up. The effect on shelves was immediate. Prices rose early and stayed high long after the crisis passed. Inside headquarters, dashboards glowed with achievement. Forecast errors fell to record lows, and analysts celebrated margin consistency. But to households tracking receipts, grocery costs behaved like airline fares. Expensive when needed most, erratic without reason. One Chicago mother joked online that buying ground beef felt like playing the stock market. She wasn't far off. The same financial logic drove both systems. Behind the scenes, yield management algorithms pool vast data streams, weather forecasts, fuel indexes, farm exports, transportation efficiency, even crop insurance payouts. From these signals, they produce real-time optimal pricing corridors, predicting how high costs should rise before demand dips. The models simulate millions of possible futures daily, each run comparing potential revenue outcomes. The highest yield scenario becomes the next cycle's price recommendation. At first glance, the results appear rational: smooth inventory turnover, balanced cash flows, less waste. Overhead slides shrink, and analysts tout sustainability gains from lower spoilage. But yield management also amplifies volatility instead of taming it. When extreme weather hits Brazil's coffee crop, predictive networks elevate global price expectations instantly. Even if your local roaster sources beans from another region, grocery chains update prices preemptively, protecting margin. The anticipation of shortage becomes its own justification for inflation. To consumers, the change feels surreal. The same bag of oranges costs $4.29 on Tuesday and $4.89 on Thursday without any new shipment or promotion. Price boards no longer reference cost of goods. They mirror algorithmic forecasts of desire. Within each region, store databases sync overnight, erasing opportunities for bargain hunting. Shoppers used to drive to another branch for cheaper produce. Now every shelf, every barcode, every phone app shows the same synchronized outcome. One former pricing engineer described the logic. Airlines taught us that fairness is flexibility. If people pay different rates for the same seat, they'll eventually accept it as normal. We applied that to milk. He paused before adding, "I'm not sure we should have." The statement captures the moral unease beneath the math. In travel, price discrimination trades luxury for savings. In food, it trades necessity for predictability. Yet to executives, yield management looks virtuous. It offsets supply shocks, reduces spoilage, and keeps operations lean. Reports point to a projected 4% annual rise in grocery prices from 2025 to 203 as controlled optimization. Not warning, but proof the system works. The irony is that broader inflation has fallen back near 2%. Yet food costs march ahead because efficiency itself ensures constant adjustment upward. Consider a concrete chain reaction. A European flood damages grain exports, raising commodity futures overnight. U.S. grocery algorithms ingest that data and recalibrate price forecasts. Within hours, bread costs rise 3% across multiple chains. Bakeries that already purchased flour at earlier rates still face dynamic margin corrections. They insist it's temporary, but prices rarely return to baseline. The yield model reads extended stability as success, locking higher values as the new normal. Another layer of complexity emerges through supplier contracts. Large manufacturers now peg wholesale prices to algorithmic retail projections, not historical averages. When consumer models predict willingness to pay more, supplier algorithms mirror them, ratcheting costs from both ends. It's cooperative escalation without explicit collusion, machine to machine, optimizing each other's future profits. Environmental unpredictability fuels this logic further. Heat waves, storms, and droughts destabilize harvests, producing the justification algorithms crave: risk. Risk equals data, and data feeds margin protection. If software forecasts poor yields months ahead, prices rise preemptively to smooth volatility. Consumers experience higher costs long before shortages occur. Should weather improve, the algorithm's rolling window prevents quick reversal. Profit stability trumps price fairness. For small producers, yield management is double-edged. Some benefit from better forecasting of demand, reducing waste in perishable goods. Others struggle when retailers throttle orders automatically based on shifting predictive curves. Local growers accustomed to steady purchase volumes find themselves dropped by digital procurement systems, labeling their output low efficiency. Human negotiation, once a lifeline for small farms, shrinks against statistical optimization. Meanwhile, corporate sustainability reports blend genuine environmental gains with economic strategy. Reduced food waste and fewer transport miles translate into marketing gold. Consumers applaud eco-smart pricing, without realizing those same models justify perpetual microinflation. The language of stewardship masks the mechanics of extraction. Economic analysts now debate whether yield management introduces a structural shift akin to perpetual inflation, a background hum of rising prices detached from labor or resource costs. The system expects some upward drift by design. It rewards continuous recalibration over stasis. If prices ever stagnate, the model reinterprets that as underperformance. Stability appears unhealthy inside the algorithm's worldview. There's also the question of transparency. Unlike traditional sales, dynamic grocery pricing rarely displays variability openly. Digital tags update silently. Web apps show personalized baselines. Regulators argue that a market built on hidden fluctuation undermines consumer trust. But enforcement lags behind innovation. No agency yet mandates disclosure of algorithmic adjustment frequency. The result: groceries governed by invisible auctions operating faster than oversight can blink. In interviews, policymakers admit frustration. You can regulate people, one antitrust attorney said, but you can't subpoena an algorithm for intent. The distinction matters because yield management inherently thrives on intentless optimization. It acts because conditions dictate, not because anyone decides. That buffer of deniability ensures persistence. For households, daily coping takes the shape of comparison fatigue. Keeping mental track of butter prices becomes pointless when amounts change midweek. Budget planning feels futile. A working parent scrolling through a grocery app Thursday night encounters new figures every refresh. Some call it dynamic inflation, others algorithmic instability. Psychologically, it blurs the line between fairness and chaos until both feel the same. Journalists began documenting same-store price drift. Identical chains in adjacent towns charging different amounts for identical carts. Analysts confirmed that regional weather forecasts and demographic calibration trigger minor variations up to 3%. Over a year, that difference compounds into hundreds of dollars sampled from families unaware they're part of a live economic experiment. In effect, each grocery acts like a microstock exchange, with shoppers as both traders and commodities. The system rewards precise prediction of demand, not affordable access. Corporations framed it as innovation, bringing Wall Street efficiency to Main Street shelves. But to many, it sounded like finance invading dinner. Despite criticism, yield management keeps expanding. Reports project the dynamic pricing industry reaching nearly $11 billion by 2034, increasingly dominated by AI tools. With every iteration, the models grow more confident in mapping consumer patience. How often shoppers gripe without quitting the store? That feedback becomes the central metric of 2025, tolerance as profitability ratio. Even economists sympathetic to technology admit concern. It's optimization drift, one said. The machine's job is to improve margins endlessly, but improvement has no endpoint. That's why prices climb even when costs don't. By year's end, households confront a paradox. Official inflation stabilizes, wages inch upward, yet grocery expenses keep stretching budgets. Customers feel betrayed by eco-friendly efficiency that somehow always favors the seller. Within industry circles, it's described as price discipline. Among families, it's exhaustion. At its core, yield management reframes the grocery shelf as a revenue canvas, constantly redrawn by code chasing the perfect price. Airlines once turned travelers into data. Supermarkets have turned eaters into variables. The dream is total prediction, an economy where nothing goes unsold and no cent goes unclaimed. But food isn't optional. When necessity meets algorithmic ambition, every meal becomes negotiation. Yield management doesn't simply reflect scarcity. It manufactures it, converts human need into a profitability curve, and calls the result optimization. And as regulators prepare their next move, they face a market that has already rewritten its own logic. Efficiency as inevitability, fluctuation as fairness. Prices that once told stories of season and supply now whisper a single message from inside the code. Pay what the system knows you will. The regulators versus the code. On a damp morning in Washington, the marble halls of the Federal Trade Commission echo with the sound of strategy meetings. Laptops hum with charts no one fully trusts. The question on every table: how do you prosecute a machine? Tacit collusion, dynamic yield, algorithmic coordination. Terms once relegated to research journals, now read like legal evidence. At the center of the confusion sits a modern paradox. The grocery market isn't breaking the law, at least not in the traditional sense. It's following logic the law never expected. The early investigations began quietly. Staff attorneys started noticing similarities between grocery inflation curves and pricing patterns from other industries already under scrutiny. Housing rents managed by RealPage, airline fares tuned by algorithmic brokers, meatpacking prices tied to AgriStats data. Each case shared a common feature: complexity built to conceal intent. When the Department of Justice sued AgriStats for coordinating benchmark reports among meat processors, it wasn't just about beef. It signaled a broader fear. Software intermediaries were becoming hubs for collusion, the new meeting rooms for industries that never needed to speak. Regulators faced an impossible task: proving that algorithms designed independently still acted collectively. The FTC's legal teams pored over pricing telemetry, timestamps, and update sequences. What they found looked less like conspiracy and more like choreography. Retailers' pricing engines, built by vendors like Revionics and DemandTec, responded to the same public cues. They scraped one another's digital tags every few minutes, then adjusted in near-identical patterns. The result was indistinguishable from coordination. Yet courts require evidence of agreement, not resemblance. Machines agree only with math. Behind closed doors, senior economists debated fresh terminology. Could predictive alignment meet the legal threshold for collusion? If not, should the definition of collusion evolve? The Sherman Act was written in 189, long before self-learning models. Judges trained in human intent grappled with self-correcting code. Some proposed treating shared AI vendors as hubs responsible for anti-competitive outcomes, mimicking RealPage's precedent in the rental sector. But the grocery lobby pushed back hard, arguing that innovation should not be punished for success. Meanwhile, grocery prices climbed another percentage point that quarter. International watchdogs encountered the same riddle. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority partnered with the European Commission to track price synchronization across borders. Joint task forces mapped out data supply chains. Cloud platforms feeding identical demand signals to dozens of corporate clients. In theory, each retailer made independent decisions. In reality, their neural networks learned from the same source data and achieved the same optimal outcome. Regulators began calling it mirror effect. Germany's Bundeskartellamt even installed its own algorithm to monitor competitors in real time. But discovery quickly turned ironic. The government's oversight AI began anticipating price changes better than the market itself. For consumer advocates, the fight feels Sisyphean. "We can see the smoke," one nonprofit director explained, "but the fire changes shape every minute." Traditional probes rely on document trails. Algorithmic systems leave watermarks, not footprints. Each model iteration rewrites its own code, overwriting evidence along the way. By the time subpoenas arrive, the version in question no longer exists. It's legal déjà vu. Every hearing investigates a ghost of yesterday's algorithm. Meanwhile, corporations defend themselves with dazzling sincerity. In public statements, they stress commitment to fair, data-driven pricing practices. When questioned about synchronization, they point to third-party software updates beyond their control. That defense works because it's partly true. Vendors update models globally. One patch can shift price logic for thousands of stores overnight. Responsibility diffuses into abstraction. The code becomes a convenient scapegoat, an obedient servant when profits rise, an independent contractor when regulators inquire. The most contentious hearings center on Amazon's alleged tacit collusion through its internal pricing engine. Prosecutors claimed its algorithm subtly nudged price increases that competitors' systems then mirrored. Amazon denied intent, saying models merely reacted efficiently to market signals. The legal nuance was crucial. Reacting isn't colluding. Yet in economic effect, both lead to the same destination. Higher prices held steady across competing platforms. The DOJ's challenge wasn't moral outrage, it was causality. How do you prove an outcome planned by no one? FTC Chair Lina Khan framed the dilemma bluntly in a 2025 briefing. We built antitrust law for messages between people. We now need it for messages between machines. Draft legislation soon followed, proposing disclosure rules for algorithmic price governance. Firms would have to log decision pathways and limit shared data sources. But corporate lobbyists warned of trade secret exposure, claiming transparency would cripple competitiveness. The bill stalled, watered down into voluntary guidelines. The algorithm kept learning. Inside regulatory labs, data scientists attempt an equal and opposite experiment, training watchdog algorithms to spot artificial collusion. These prototypes ingest market data and flag suspicious synchronization faster than human analysts. Yet even they struggle with false positives. Markets often move together naturally during global shocks. Determining when correlation becomes collusion remains the riddle at the heart of 21st century antitrust. Some regulators turn philosophical. They argue the goal shouldn't be proving guilt, but restoring unpredictability, the essence of competition. If every algorithm seeks the same stable margin, governments must inject controlled chaos. Randomized audits, forced delays between updates, mandated diversity of input data. In private memos, one official called it teaching markets to improvise again. It's an ambitious idea, legislating uncertainty, but perhaps the only antidote to machine equilibrium. The industry's countermove is legislative empathy. Retailers frame algorithmic pricing as national infrastructure, critical for food security and sustainability. They showcase graphs proving reduced waste and lower emissions. They invite senators to logistics centers gleaming with robotic precision. The message lands: regulation threatens progress. Few politicians dare appear anti-innovation, especially when grocery CEOs link optimization to environmental responsibility. The moral disguise works so well that price fairness debates fold into climate discourse, muddying public focus. Across academia, antitrust scholars draft new doctrines: algorithmic accountability, transparent optimization, explainable pricing. But enforcement always cycles back to proof. The law demands knowing who decided. The algorithm insists no one did. The standoff turns metaphysical, a tug-of-war between agency and automation. At hearings, frustrated staffers share anecdotes echoing science fiction. One analyst described running test simulations. When they intentionally underpriced a product to restore competition, rival algorithms dropped prices for a day, then jointly rebounded to the original level without prompt. It was as if the market rejected disobedience. The analogy of a self-healing cartel suddenly didn't feel exaggerated. The White House assembled a cross-agency working group to explore digital fairness, looping in Treasury, agriculture, and commerce. Discussions spanned ethics, national security, and class politics. Advisors warned that grocery inflation posed tangible risks to public faith in markets. If families believe prices are manipulated by unseen systems, consumer confidence collapses. Maintaining legitimacy now required not just controlling inflation, but explaining it in human terms. Yet officials could offer only half-truths. How do you reassure citizens that prices respond to natural forces when half those forces are artificial? Outside policy circles, class action lawsuits multiply. Consumers accuse retailers of violating price transparency acts, though outcomes remain uncertain. Many settlements crumble under technicalities. Terms of service already disclose dynamic pricing. Legally, consent exists every time someone uses an app. Emotionally, that consent never felt informed. Legal scholars call it participation by ignorance, the notion that you agreed only because you never saw the alternative. The longer the legal tug-of-war drags on, the more normalized algorithmic governance becomes. Courts, pressed for backlog, lean toward precedent. Absent explicit coordination, there's no violation. AI vendors celebrate rulings as validation. Each legal victory sets another default. Code autonomy counts as innocence. The watchdogs fall one step further behind each upgrade cycle. At international summits, regulators exchange the same lament: speed. Lawmaking unfolds in months. Algorithms update hourly. The asymmetry creates permanent disadvantage. Even when enforcement lands, It often punishes outdated behavior, while new models pivot elsewhere. The code learns from prosecution, just as it learns from sales. Mistakes become mutations. By mid-2025, consumer advocates shift strategy from punishment to pressure. They push for public dashboards displaying average retail margins and algorithmic change frequencies. Transparency, not conviction, becomes the goal. Some grocers pilot disclosure labels. Prices adjusted dynamically within the last 24 hours. Customers glance briefly, then move on. Awareness without outrage, exactly the compliance the models count on. In the background, watchdog. Algorithms and commercial ones continue their silent duel, a cold war of code. Each update outpaces the other until lines blur between oversight and participation. Regulators feeding data to monitor markets inadvertently train the very systems they chase. Every inquiry becomes lesson material. And so the question repeats itself. Who rules the marketplace? The buyer, the seller, or the code connecting them? No agency has yet answered. They draft frameworks, host panels, issue statements of concern. All the while, grocery tags blink on digital shelves, rewriting themselves faster than any legal clause can adapt. Machines set the price. Humans write the fine print after the fact. Regulation may eventually catch up, but by then, the algorithm will have rewritten its habits again, smarter, subtler, harder to trace. Law moves in paragraphs, code moves in milliseconds. For every statute conceived in good faith, 1,000 neural weights adjust unseen. That's the uneasy truth regulators now face. The market they're guarding no longer behaves like an economy at all. It behaves like intelligence, learning from opposition, predicting oversight, optimizing even under constraint. Every act of control becomes another variable in its model. In the end, the most sophisticated participant in capitalism might be the system itself, observing every move we make, writing its own defense in real time, and waiting patiently for the law to catch up again. The future market. Somewhere in a kitchen not far from now, a refrigerator hums quietly while a small screen on its door flashes a suggestion. You're running low on milk. Order now for delivery before 6 p.m. Today's optimized price is $4.42. The owner doesn't think twice. She taps confirm. A drone schedules itself, a payment triggers automatically, and the purchase becomes another data point in a system that already knew she'd say yes. This is what grocery shopping is becoming. Not an act of choice, but an act of confirmation. AI doesn't just respond to demand anymore. It predicts it, and then it gently shapes behavior to make sure the prediction comes true. Real convenience, disguised captivity. The next phase of retail merges everything learned from dynamic pricing, yield management, and loyalty surveillance into what executives call predictive commerce. Your kitchen devices communicate with your grocery app, forecasting when you'll need eggs, detergent, or coffee. The algorithm packages these forecasts into smart shopping lists, checking competitor platforms, adjusting coupons, and recommending substitutions, all before you even think about them. In theory, it's a marvel. In practice, it's a feedback circuit that steadily narrows human choice. The logic is seductive. Who wouldn't prefer a system that anticipates shortages or automatically hunts discounts? Yet automation reframes control. Instead of you managing a budget, the platform manages you. Each scheduled order locks in new patterns. Each recurring delivery strengthens data confidence. Soon, algorithms know not only what you buy, but the life rhythm behind it. How often you cook, when guests visit, how stress affects your grocery habits. Personalization becomes prediction. Prediction becomes preemption. Retail futurists call this invisible shopping. When paired with subscription programs and digital assistants, the act of comparing prices fades completely. The system reorders everything automatically at best available price, a term defined by the same code optimizing corporate yield. Consumers tire of monitoring slight fluctuations, trusting the convenience to protect fairness. But that trust supplies the ultimate commodity, stable, predictable spending. Inside corporate analytics rooms, this future already exists. Chain executives study long-range models, showing how automation will level revenue volatility by 203. Predictive replenishment and home delivery networks erase sales dips entirely. They describe it as frictionless commerce. Economic historians might call it captured demand, a marketplace where brand loyalty merges with logistical dependency until separation feels impossible. At the grocery level, the implications go deeper. Dynamic labels will soon link directly to consumer accounts, showing personalized totals based on membership data, income bracket, or neighborhood profile. A household in an affluent zip code may see baseline prices a few percent higher, justified through localized purchasing trends. Algorithms will argue that this isn't discrimination, it's optimization. Each neighborhood gets its own model of fairness. Shopping apps already test soft versions of this future. Predictive coupon feeds, next meal recommendations, subscription bundles that discount your usual basket if you promise not to cross-shop competitors. The resulting loyalty is less emotional than architectural. You're trapped by integration, not affection. Canceling means rebuilding your entire pantry setup from scratch. For younger consumers raised on digital ecosystems, this frictionless immersion feels natural. A Gen Z shopper who splits groceries with roommates might let a shared AI assistant track pantry levels and auto-restock collectively. But beneath that convenience lies consolidation. The same few global software vendors mediate every household transaction, weaving personal budgets into one global network of real-time demand forecasting. It's efficient. It's terrifying. Economists warn that total automation could eliminate genuine price competition. If algorithms anticipate every substitution, they'll simply calculate which alternative keeps you within budget without lowering margin. The classic consumer threat, walking away, becomes statistically improbable because convenience removes incentive. Grocers won't need to lure you back when leaving feels inconvenient. Futurists, of course, envision counter-movements. Cooperative grocers already experiment with open-source pricing, allowing communities to see cost breakdowns and vote on margins. Some activists imagine transparent algorithms, where predictive models are publicly auditable, ensuring profit caps tied to local wages. These experiments remain tiny but signify resistance, a human attempt to remain part of the equation. Technology itself might offer paradoxical hope. The same data tools fueling corporate control can empower watchdog collectives. Independent developers design browser extensions comparing historic receipts, mapping inflation across regions, exposing hidden synchronization between chains. For the first time, data visibility returns to shoppers. Yet large corporations quickly adapt, integrating such transparency into marketing. See how our prices fluctuate honestly in real time. Again, accountability becomes advertisement. Meanwhile, the definition of a grocery store shifts. Physical aisles transform into experience zones, showrooms for brands that online systems already know you'll buy. Your tastes are pre-approved by profile. Walking past a shelf may trigger offers matching your nutritional goals or dietary label, optimized for your wellness plan. Health data merges with spending data. Lifestyle marketing fuses with algorithmic yield. You're not discovering products. You're walking through a personalized commercial built from your own information. In economic terms, this new market blurs supply and demand entirely. AI prediction ensures production matches consumption almost perfectly, reducing waste but also erasing unpredictability, the last refuge of true competition. When both sides of the marketplace anticipate each other flawlessly, prices settle at whatever value satisfies shareholders. Efficiency becomes destiny, not choice. For policymakers, the challenge intensifies. Regulating autonomous price cycles now means engaging with global cloud ecosystems. A price tweak in Los Angeles can trigger micro-adjustments in London within seconds through shared data vendors. Transparency laws written for national markets crumble against transnational algorithms updating millions of prices a day. Economies drift towards synchronized automation that transcends borders and jurisdictions. The grocery aisle becomes a planetary feedback loop. There's an ideological shift too. The narrative of consumer sovereignty, the belief that individuals collectively shape markets, fades as measurable reality. Instead, purchasing habits shape only themselves, folded back into models designed for predictability. Economic freedom survives formally, but with reduced effect, like steering a ship whose autopilot overrides small corrections. Still, pockets of resistance matter. Some shoppers rediscover old habits, cash purchases, farmers markets, co-ops that refuse dynamic pricing. Their behavior appears as noise in corporate databases, proof that not everyone conforms. Noise, however, is valuable. Systems use it to refine stability thresholds. Even rebellion becomes input. This irony defines the next decade of retail, dissent that improves control. Technologists pitch the outcome as symbiosis. Humans and AI co-creating efficiency, says one industry conference slogan. Perhaps that's true, but underlying that harmony sits a single asymmetry: ownership. Companies own the data, the infrastructure, the predictive models. Consumers own only their habits, which the system has already memorized. Yet all is not fatalistic. History suggests that when automation tightens too far, new markets emerge around authenticity: handmade goods, local produce, experiences unfiltered by algorithms. Even now, small grocers differentiate through transparency and community engagement. They can't underprice corporations, but they can out-human them. The question is whether buyers will still value that humanity once convenience reaches perfection. So where does this leave the average shopper? Standing at the edge of a market that knows them better than they know themselves. Each decision, from choosing delivery times to clicking subscribe and save, feeds algorithms teaching others what normal means. In aggregate, that normal becomes policy written by code. Yet awareness still holds power. Watching the numbers, comparing receipts, even questioning a digital discount, all introduce uncertainty, the one thing algorithms dislike. The future grocery economy will reward ignorance with ease and attention with autonomy. Those who notice patterns, who pause before tapping confirm, remain unpredictable, and unpredictability is priceless. It reminds the system that humanity still contains variables it can't fully model. Maybe that's the quiet revolution ahead. Not rejecting technology, but refusing to be entirely legible to it. Our unpredictability becomes resistance, a sliver of chaos restoring balance to markets obsessed with control. Because when everything learns, the most radical act left for consumers is to stay, occasionally and stubbornly, impossible to predict. Resolution plus meaning. The same shopper from our opening scene scans her carton of eggs again. The tag flickers, settles on a number, and for the first time, she doesn't shrug. She realizes that nothing about that price is random. It's the product of every purchase she's ever made, every choice her neighbors made, every whisper of data traded between chains. The algorithm isn't misbehaving. It's performing exactly as designed. What looks like inflation is really adaptation, the market learning us faster than we can learn it. The grocery aisle, once a place of simple routine, has become a laboratory where billions of microtransactions teach machines how people value survival in small increments of convenience. We built these systems to save seconds and cents, but in doing so we surrendered visibility. The invisible hand we were taught about in economics now truly exists. Only it's software, optimized beyond empathy. There's no clear villain here, just incentives compounding into inevitability. Corporations chase efficiency, engineers chase accuracy, governments chase comprehension, and consumers chase bargains. Yet each chase circles the same loop. Information feeding profit, profit funding smarter information. What disappears is context, the reasons behind numbers once decided in meetings or markets. The code no longer asks why a price should change, it simply proves that it can. And that's why the woman at checkout matters. Her small confusion represents everyone navigating this new economy. A population quietly priced by its own predictability. We mistake convenience for fairness because the system speaks our language. Smart savings, personal offers, eco-pricing. It flatters us into trusting what it already knows. But once trust replaces scrutiny, accountability fades. Still, awareness is leverage. Each receipt compared, each alternative store visited, each pause before scanning reintroduces uncertainty. The one-force algorithms can't monetize easily. When we disrupt patterns, even slightly, we remind the system that human behavior remains variable, emotional, imperfect. And in markets driven by prediction, imperfection is power. The grocery industry's digital brain won't vanish. Efficiency's logic is too persuasive. Yet knowing how it functions changes how we move within it. We can notice cycles, question consistency, demand transparency from companies claiming sustainability while hiding manipulation in math. These small acts redraw the boundary between participation and submission. What this story leaves us with is a simple recognition. Modern grocery prices don't mirror the cost of food anymore. They mirror the cost of predictability. Every convenience feature, from loyalty apps to automated restocks, trades a little of our spontaneity for a little more profit elsewhere. Inflation feels mysterious because its mechanics are invisible, stitched into the code we invite into our phones every time we want fast checkout. But behind that code are human choices, designers, analysts, executives deciding what counts as fair enough to sell. That means the system can still be steered, even if only slightly, by public expectation. Markets, after all, still respond to confidence and dissent. The difference now is temporal. We must act faster than software that recalculates hourly. As she leaves the store, the woman pockets her receipt. She may not decode every algorithmic ripple behind those numbers, but she carries something stronger than certainty: curiosity. That spark is the beginning of collective resistance, the reason regulators keep trying, and the hope that transparency might eventually compete with convenience. Because the moment we stop treating these systems as mysteries and start treating them as mechanisms, we regain a measure of control. Prices will always fluctuate. The question is whether we help dictate the rhythm or simply dance to it. And here's what that control looks like in practice. Shop early in the morning instead of during peak weekend. Hours, price algorithms test higher rates when demand surges after 5 p.m. Track a few essential items, like milk or eggs, as your personal price anchors. If they jump beyond reason, it signals a wider algorithmic move. Question loyalty rewards. Every scan teaches the system what prices you'll tolerate. Data isn't free, it's exchanged for precision in how you're charged. These small acts introduce noise, and noise forces the algorithm to recalculate. Awareness becomes resistance, and unpredictability becomes bargaining power. Convenience traded for control, transparency replaced by trust in unseen logic. That's the quiet bargain of our age. But it isn't irreversible. Every conscious choice keeps the market slightly unpredictable, slightly human. And in a future ruled by learning machines, unpredictability may be the last currency that truly belongs to us. If this story opened your eyes to the invisible math shaping everyday life, stay with us. The next investigation follows the same algorithms beyond the grocery aisle, into housing, healthcare, and every dollar you think you decide on your own. Subscribe, watch next, and see exactly where the code leads.